Andrew didn't plan to stop at the shelter that morning. He had been driving with no real destination, just trying to clear his head, when the gray building by the side of the road caught his attention. The sign read, County Animal Shelter. Without thinking too much about it, he pulled into the nearly empty parking lot and turned off the engine. The place looked quiet from the outside, but as soon as he stepped through the front door, the smell of disinfectant and wet fur hit him, followed by the sound of barking echoing down the concrete hallway. Dogs jumped against the metal gates as he walked past, some whining, others barking loudly, desperate to be noticed. A staff member hurried by holding a clipboard and casually said, "Just so you know, we're closing soon. Last euthanasia is in 10 minutes. Andrew nodded politely, but the words stayed in his mind as he continued walking down the corridor. Near the end of the row, the noise faded. One kennel was completely silent. Inside, a thin, caramel-colored dog lay curled up in the corner on a worn blanket. His ribs were visible. His collar looked old, and unlike the others, he didn't bark or move around. He simply watched. His eyes followed Andrew slowly, calm and tired, like he had already given up trying to get anyone's attention. A small paper was taped to the gate. Name, Caramelo. Status, last chance. The water bowl was still full, the food untouched. The same staff member stopped beside Andrew and spoke quietly. "If no one adopts him, we have to proceed." Andrew glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:50 a.m. 10 minutes. That was all this dog had left. Caramelo slowly stood up, walked to the gate, and gently pressed his nose between the bars, saying nothing, just looking at him. Andrew crouched down without thinking and asked, "How much time does he have?" The woman sighed. "Not much." After a short pause, Andrew said, "I'll take him." Some stories don't just warm your heart. They stay with you for days. The kind of story that reminds you how a single moment, a single decision, can completely change a life forever. Not just for a person, but for an animal too. Because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness happen when no one is watching, and the quietest heroes end up making the biggest difference. And today's story is exactly that. It's about 10 minutes, one forgotten dog, and a man who walked into the right place at the exact right time without even knowing it. What happened next didn't just save a life, it changed 2 lives forever. If you enjoy emotional animal stories that show loyalty, second chances, and real connections that feel stronger than words, you're going to love what we share here. So before we start, make sure you subscribe to the channel and join us here on the wildlife movie, Silent Heroes, because every week we bring you powerful stories about animals and the humans whose lives they transform. Now let me tell you what happened the morning Andrew met a dog named Caramelo, just 10 minutes before it was too late. Andrew wasn't the kind of person people usually noticed. He didn't talk much, didn't laugh loudly, didn't have a big group of friends, or a life full of plans. Most days he simply moved from one place to another. Work, home, sleep. Like he was following a routine he never really chose. From the outside, everything about him looked normal. Steady job, small apartment, bills paid on time. Nothing dramatic. Nothing impressive either. Just quiet. Too quiet. He grew up in a house where silence meant safety. His parents argued constantly when he was a kid, the kind of arguments that started over nothing and ended with doors slamming and things breaking. His father had a short temper and believed that being tough was the same thing as being strong. His mother worked double shifts and was almost never home. When she was too tired to talk. No one asked Andrew how school was. No one showed up to games or birthdays. He learned early that it was easier not to need anything from anyone. If he stayed quiet, he wouldn't disappoint anyone. If he didn't expect love, he wouldn't miss it. By the time he was a teenager, he had already stopped trying to connect with people. He kept to himself, spent most of his time fixing old electronics or helping neighbors with small repairs just to stay busy. Teachers called him independent, but the truth was simpler. He just didn't know how to ask for help. When he finally moved out at 18, it didn't feel like leaving home. It just felt like changing buildings. For years, his life followed the same pattern. Work long hours, come back to an empty apartment, microwave dinner, fall asleep with the TV on. Sometimes days passed without him speaking to anyone outside of work. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It just felt normal. Then he met Claire. She was the first person who really tried to get close to him. She talked a lot, laughed easily, filled every room with energy. At first, Andrew didn't understand why she liked him, but being around her made things feel lighter. For the first time, he imagined what a different life could look like. Dinners together, weekend trips, maybe even a family someday. He tried. He really did. But every time she asked him to open up, to talk about his past, about his feelings, he froze. The words never came. It was like there was a wall inside him he didn't know how to break. Claire used to tell him, "I feel like you're here, but not really here." And he didn't know how to explain that he had felt that way his whole life. The fight started small. She wanted more affection, more conversation, more emotion. Andrew didn't know how to give her that. He showed love in quiet ways, fixing her car, cooking dinner, picking her up after work. But to her, it wasn't enough. She wanted to feel chosen, understood. He wanted to give that to her. But every time he tried, something inside him shut down. One night, after another long argument, she said the words he had secretly feared for months. "It's like loving a wall, Andrew. I can't keep trying to reach someone who won't let me in." She packed a small suitcase and left. No screaming, no drama. Just tired disappointment. That hurt more than anything. After that, the apartment felt even emptier than before. Her coffee mug still sat in the kitchen cabinet for weeks because he couldn't bring himself to move it. He started sleeping less, eating less. Work became the only thing keeping him distracted. Some nights he would sit in his car outside his building for 20 minutes before going inside, just staring at nothing, not ready to face another silent room. He told himself he was fine, that this was just how life was supposed to be. Some people weren't meant to have happy endings. Some people just existed. So on that morning, when he got in the car and started driving with no destination, he wasn't looking for anything. He wasn't trying to rescue anyone. He was just trying to outrun the feeling that his life had quietly stopped moving forward. He didn't know that, a few miles away, behind the metal bars of a small kennel, there was a dog who felt exactly the same way. Andrew didn't know exactly why he turned the steering wheel toward the shelter that morning. He hadn't planned it, hadn't searched for it, hadn't even noticed the building before. One second he was driving aimlessly through unfamiliar streets. The next he was slowing down in front of a faded gray structure with a small sign that read, "County Animal Shelter." His foot pressed the brake almost on its own. For a moment he just sat there with the engine running, staring at the entrance like he was waiting for a reason to leave. He told himself it was pointless. He wasn't there to adopt a dog. He barely managed to take care of himself. But something about the quiet parking lot in that old building made it hard to drive away. So he turned off the engine, grabbed his keys, and stepped out. The air smelled cold and sterile when he walked inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, casting everything in a pale white glow. The place felt smaller than he expected. Narrow hallways, concrete floors, metal gates lined up side by side. The sound hit him first, barking, scratching, whining, dozens of dogs reacting to every movement. As he walked past the first row, several jumped against the bars, tails wagging wildly, eyes wide with hope. Some spun in circles, others cried like they were begging. It was overwhelming, like every animal in that room was fighting for one chance to be chosen. Andrew shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and kept walking slowly. He didn't make eye contact for too long. Every time he did, he felt guilty, like he was making a promise he couldn't keep. A staff member passed him with a clipboard and offered a polite but tired smile. "Let me know if you need anything," she said, then added casually, "Just so you know, we're closing soon. Last euthanasia is scheduled in 10 minutes. He stopped walking. 10 minutes? He asked. She nodded. Yeah. Slow week for adoptions. She said it like it was routine, like it was just another task on the schedule. But the words stuck to him. 10 minutes, not an hour. Not later today. 10 minutes. He tried to shake the feeling off and continued down the hallway, but something had changed. The noise that filled the room seconds ago now felt heavier. Each bark sounded desperate. Each metal gate felt like a countdown. Then near the end of the row, the sound faded. One kennel was quiet. No jumping, no scratching, no barking, just silence. Andrew slowed his steps and looked inside. A thin caramel-colored dog lay curled up on a worn blanket in the corner. His fur was dull, his body too skinny, ribs visible with every breath. An old collar hung loosely around his neck. He didn't move when Andrew approached. He didn't even lift his head at first. He just stayed there. Still, like he had already accepted something. Andrew stepped closer to the gate, and finally the dog looked up. Their eyes met, and what struck him wasn't fear or aggression. It was exhaustion. The kind of tired that goes deeper than the body. The kind that comes from waiting too long for something that never comes. There was a small paper clipped to the metal bars. Name, Caramelo status, last chance. The water bowl was almost full, the food untouched. No one had tried. Or maybe too many people had walked past already. The staff member reappeared beside him and lowered her voice. He's been here the longest, older. Health issues when he came in. People usually want puppies. She paused. If no one adopts him, we have to proceed. Andrew looked at the clock on the wall. 9:50 a.m. 10 minutes. His chest tightened. He didn't understand why this dog, out of all of them, was the one he couldn't walk away from. There were younger dogs, healthier ones, happier ones. But this one wasn't fighting anymore. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, he just watched. Quiet. Like he expected nothing. Andrew recognized that look. He had seen it in the mirror for years. Caramelo slowly stood up, legs shaky, and walked to the front of the kennel. He didn't bark, didn't wag his tail wildly. He simply pressed his nose gently between the bars and breathed out, warm air hitting Andrew's hand. It wasn't a plea. It felt like trust, like the dog had already decided. Andrew swallowed hard and crouched down, his fingers wrapped around the cold metal gate. How much time does he really have? He asked. The answer came soft and simple. Not much. For a second, his mind raced with excuses. You don't have space. You work too much. You're not ready. This is a bad idea. But another thought cut through all of it. If you walk away, he dies. That was it. No complicated decision, no pros and cons. Just that. Andrew stood up, heart pounding louder than the barking around him. I'll take him, he said. The word surprised even him. The staff member blinked. Are you sure? He nodded. Yeah, I'm sure. While she went to get the paperwork, Andrew stayed there by the kennel watching Caramelo. The dog sat down again, calm, almost like he knew something had changed, like the countdown had stopped. Andrew didn't realize it yet, but that simple sentence, I'll take him, was the first real decision he had made for himself in years. And he had no idea that this quiet, fragile dog, the one nobody else wanted, was about to walk into his life and change everything in ways he couldn't imagine, because saving Caramelo was only the beginning. Soon Andrew would understand something strange. He hadn't rescued the dog. The dog was about to rescue him. The ride home was quiet at first, the kind of quiet that feels awkward when two strangers share the same space. Andrew placed an old blanket over the passenger seat and carefully helped Caramelo into the car, expecting resistance, but the dog didn't fight or hesitate. He moved slowly, like every step required effort, then settled down without making a sound. For the first few minutes, Andrew kept glancing sideways, unsure what to say or even how to act. It felt strange having another living being that close to him after so long. Caramelo didn't bark or whine. He simply lay there, watching the road through the window, occasionally shifting his eyes toward Andrew, as if making sure he was still there. At a red light, Andrew reached out and gently rested his hand on the dog's back. Caramelo flinched for a second, then relaxed. That small moment, that tiny acceptance, felt bigger than it should have. At home, Andrew worried the apartment might feel too small or too empty, but the second they walked inside, something changed. The place didn't feel silent anymore. Caramelo's slow footsteps echoed softly across the floor as he explored each corner, sniffing the couch, the kitchen, the hallway. Andrew filled a bowl with fresh water and some food, not expecting much, but this time Caramelo ate. Slowly at first, then with real hunger. Watching him finish the entire bowl gave Andrew a strange sense of relief, like he had done something right for once. Later that night, he laid an old towel beside the couch, thinking the dog might prefer space. But when he turned off the lights and lay down, he heard the soft sound of nails on the floor. Caramelo walked over and quietly lowered himself next to the couch instead, close enough that Andrew could hear his breathing. Not touching, just near, like he didn't want to be alone. The next few days settled into a simple rhythm. Andrew woke up earlier to take Caramelo outside. They walked slowly around the block, the cold morning air clearing Andrew's head in a way coffee never could. Caramelo stayed close, always slightly behind him, like he was making sure Andrew was safe. At first, Andrew thought it was just fear, but even as the dog gained strength, he never wandered far. When Andrew cooked, Caramelo lay by the kitchen door. When Andrew showered, he waited outside the bathroom. When Andrew sat on the couch at night, Caramelo rested his head on Andrew's foot. No noise, no demands, just quiet company. And somehow, that quiet felt different from the silence Andrew was used to. It wasn't empty anymore, it felt shared. For the first time in years, Andrew caught himself talking out loud. Small things at first. "You hungry, buddy?" Or, "Give me a second." Then longer sentences like he was explaining his day to someone who actually cared. Caramelo always listened, eyes focused, tail giving small, slow taps against the floor. It was ridiculous, Andrew knew that. Talking to a dog like he understood every word. But it felt easier than talking to people. There was no pressure, no judgment, no expectations, just presence. A week passed like that. Then 2. Caramelo started gaining weight. His fur looked healthier. Sometimes his tail even wagged when Andrew grabbed the leash. The apartment slowly filled with small signs of life. A chew toy by the couch, a bowl by the sink, paw prints near the door. Andrew didn't notice it happening, but something inside him was getting lighter too. He slept better. He ate regularly. He even smiled sometimes without realizing it. Then one night, everything changed. Andrew came home later than usual, exhausted from a long shift. His head was pounding and his body felt heavy, like he was coming down with something. He barely had the energy to take off his shoes. Caramelo greeted him at the door, tail moving, but stopped when he noticed something was off. Andrew's movements were slower, unsteady. He skipped dinner, which he never did anymore, and collapsed onto the couch without turning on the lights. Within an hour, the fever hit hard. His skin burned. His breathing felt tight. Every muscle ached. He tried to stand up to get water, but his legs gave out halfway to the kitchen and he dropped to the floor, hitting the cabinet on the way down. The sound echoed through the apartment. Caramelo rushed over instantly. Andrew laughed weakly. I'm okay, he muttered, but his voice sounded wrong, distant even to himself. He managed to crawl back to the couch and lay there, shivering. The room felt like it was spinning. His phone was somewhere across the table, just out of reach. He closed his eyes for a second, thinking he'd rest, just for a minute. But minutes passed. Caramelo didn't move. At first, he nudged Andrew's arm gently with his nose, then harder. Then he started pacing, nails clicking fast against the floor. He let out a low whine Andrew had never heard before, not loud, but panicked. When Andrew didn't respond, Caramelo jumped onto the couch and placed both front paws on his chest, licking his face, pushing, trying to wake him up. Nothing. The dog's breathing grew faster. He circled the couch, then ran to the door, then back again. It was like he didn't know what to do, but knew something was very wrong. Finally, Caramelo did something Andrew never expected. He grabbed the sleeve of Andrew's hoodie with his teeth and pulled. Hard. Once. Twice. Then he kept tugging, whining, refusing to stop. The constant pulling, the noise, the pressure on his arm slowly dragged Andrew back to consciousness. He groaned, opening his eyes just enough to see Caramelo staring at him, ears back, trembling. "Hey, hey, it's okay," Andrew whispered, but even he didn't believe it. With effort, he reached for his phone and called for help. All the while, Caramelo stayed pressed against him, not leaving his side for a second. That night, lying there waiting for the ambulance, Andrew realized something strange. This dog, this fragile, unwanted dog everyone else had given up on, was terrified of losing him. Like Andrew was the only thing he had. And for the first time in his life, Andrew understood what it felt like to truly matter to someone. He had walked into that shelter thinking he was saving a life. But as Caramelo rested his head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat like it was the most important sound in the world, Andrew finally understood. He wasn't alone anymore. And whatever came next, they would face it together. When Andrew opened his eyes again, everything looked white. White ceiling. White lights. The steady beeping of machines somewhere to his left. For a few seconds, he didn't understand where he was or how he got there. His body felt heavy, like he had slept for days. His throat was dry, and his head throbbed with a dull, constant pressure. Then pieces of the night slowly came back. The fever, the fall, the floor, the sound of Caramelo whining, the hospital. A nurse noticed he was awake and stepped inside, checking the monitor beside his bed. She explained that he had collapsed from a severe infection and dehydration. His fever had spiked dangerously high. If he had stayed alone much longer, things could have gotten worse. Much worse. She said it calmly, like it was routine, but the words lingered in his mind. If he had stayed alone. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment, replaying that thought. Alone. Just like every other day of his life. Except, he hadn't been alone. His first real question came out hoarse. "My dog, is he okay?" The nurse gave a small smile. "Your neighbor brought him some food and is checking on him. Animal control said he wouldn't stop pacing at the door when they came. Seems pretty attached to you." Attached. Andrew closed his eyes again, feeling something tighten in his chest. Not fear this time, something warmer. The next 2 days passed slowly. Hospitals had their own sense of time, where mornings and nights blended together under fluorescent lights. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Andrew mostly lay there thinking, something he usually avoided. Without work or distractions, memories crept in. His childhood, Claire leaving, the empty apartment. All the years he convinced himself he didn't need anyone. And then, without warning, another image kept pushing through all of that. Caramelo pulling on his sleeve, refusing to give up, staying. On the third day, the doctor told him he could go home soon if his vitals stayed stable. Andrew nodded, but what he really felt was impatience. He wasn't worried about bills or emails or missed work. He just wanted to see the dog. When discharge day finally came, the hospital felt even colder than before. He signed the paperwork, changed back into his clothes, and stepped outside into the fresh air. Everything felt brighter than usual, almost unreal, like he had been gone for weeks instead of days. His neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, had offered to drive him home. During the ride, she smiled and said, "That little dog of yours hasn't left your door. I tried taking him to my place, but he just kept crying and pulling toward your apartment. Stubborn thing." Andrew looked out the window, swallowing hard. "Yeah," he said quietly. "He's stubborn." But inside, he knew it was something else. It was loyalty. When the car finally stopped in front of his building, his heart started racing in a way he couldn't explain. It felt ridiculous, getting nervous to see a dog. But his hands were shaking slightly as he unlocked the door. The second it opened, he heard it. Fast footsteps on the floor. Then Caramelo appeared at the end of the hallway. For half a second, the dog froze, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His ears lifted, his body stiffened. Then suddenly he ran. Not the slow, tired walk Andrew was used to. He ran, straight into him. Caramelo jumped up, paws hitting Andrew's legs, tail moving so hard his whole body shook. He made small sounds Andrew had never heard before, half whine, half cry, like he was overwhelmed. Andrew dropped his bag and crouched down, wrapping his arms around the dog without thinking. Caramelo pressed his head into Andrew's chest and refused to let go, licking his hands, his face, his sleeves, checking him like he needed to make sure he was real. "I'm okay, buddy. I'm okay," Andrew whispered, his voice breaking. For the first time in years, he didn't care how he sounded. They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding on to each other in the middle of the hallway. Back inside the apartment, everything looked the same. The couch, the table, the quiet walls. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Caramelo followed him everywhere that day, closer than ever. If Andrew stood up, the dog stood up. If he moved rooms, Caramelo moved with him. That night, instead of sleeping near the couch, the dog carefully climbed up beside him and curled against his side, resting his head on Andrew's arm like he was afraid that if he looked away for even a second, Andrew might disappear again. Andrew didn't push him away. He just let him stay. Days passed, and Andrew recovered his strength, but something inside him had already changed. He started taking longer walks with Caramelo, sometimes driving to small parks just so they could sit outside together. He found himself talking more, laughing more. People at work even noticed. "You look different," one coworker said. "Better." Andrew didn't know how to explain it. How do you tell someone that a dog saved your life? That the only reason you're still here is because something you rescued refused to let you go? Some nights, he would watch Caramelo sleeping on the floor, chest rising and falling slowly, and feel a quiet sense of gratitude he had never felt before. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just steady, like finally having something to lose. And strangely, that didn't scare him. It made him want to live. But life has a way of testing the things we care about most. Because neither Andrew nor Caramelo knew that very soon, something unexpected was going to happen. Something that would put them both in danger. And this time, Andrew wouldn't be the one doing the saving. A few weeks after Andrew left the hospital, life slowly settled into something he hadn't felt in years: stability. Nothing extraordinary had changed on the outside. The same apartment, the same job, the same streets. But everything felt lighter. The mornings no longer started with that heavy silence pressing against his chest. Now they began with the soft sound of paws on the floor and the gentle jingle of Caramelo's collar as the dog followed him from room to room. They built a quiet routine together without even trying. Andrew woke up early, made coffee, filled Caramelo's bowl, and took him for short walks while the neighborhood was still empty. In the evenings they walked again, sometimes around the block, sometimes a little farther to the park nearby. These small, ordinary moments began to feel important, like tiny anchors keeping Andrew grounded. For the first time in a long while, he didn't rush home because he hated being alone. He rushed home because someone was waiting for him. Every day, without fail, Caramelo sat near the door around the time Andrew usually returned, and the moment the key turned in the lock, the dog's tail started tapping against the floor like a steady drumbeat. That simple welcome, that quiet excitement, made Andrew feel needed in a way he had never experienced before. One evening, dark clouds gathered earlier than expected, and a strong wind swept through the streets, carrying the smell of rain and cold air. The park was almost empty when they arrived, leaves rolling across the pavement and tree branches bending overhead. Andrew told himself it would be a quick walk before the storm hit, nothing more than a few minutes of fresh air, and at first everything seemed normal. Caramelo walked close beside him, calmer than usual, his leash loose as they followed the familiar path near an old maintenance building at the far end of the park. Andrew's phone buzzed with a message from work, and he stopped for a moment to read it, distracted just long enough to miss the first warning signs. When he finally looked up, he caught a faint smell of smoke drifting through the air. It was subtle at first, easy to ignore, but within seconds it grew stronger, thicker, enough to make him frown and scan the area around him. That was when he noticed Caramelo had completely stopped walking. The dog's body stiffened, ears raised, eyes locked on something behind the small storage shed nearby. A low growl formed in his throat, not aggressive but tense, like pure instinct telling him something wasn't right. Before Andrew could react, a sharp cracking noise split the air and flames burst through one of the shed's side windows, spreading unnaturally fast as if something inside had ignited all at once. The wind immediately carried the smoke toward them, turning the air dark and heavy, and within seconds the calm evening transformed into chaos. Andrew stepped back, startled, trying to turn around and leave quickly, but his foot slipped on the wet leaves scattered across the concrete. He fell hard, twisting his ankle beneath him, and the pain shot up his leg so suddenly that it knocked the air out of his lungs. He tried to stand, but the moment he put weight on his foot, it gave out again. The smoke was getting closer now, thick enough to burn his throat and blur his vision, and the heat pressed against his back in waves. Panic started rising fast, the kind that makes your thoughts scatter, because the path they needed to take was already filling with smoke and there was no one nearby to help. Through the confusion, he felt the leash pulling. Caramelo wasn't frozen or afraid. He was moving with purpose. The dog circled back immediately, whining, tugging hard toward the clearer side of the park, refusing to let Andrew stay on the ground. When Andrew couldn't stand, Caramelo did something that made his chest tighten with disbelief. He grabbed the sleeve of Andrew's jacket with his teeth and pulled with all his strength, just like he had done the night Andrew collapsed at home. It wasn't random or desperate, it was determined. Over and over, the dog leaned back and dragged, using his entire body weight, refusing to let go. Andrew understood what he was trying to do and began pulling himself forward with his hands, inch by inch, using Caramelo's strength to help him move. His palms scraped against the pavement and his injured ankle throbbed with every small motion, but Caramelo never slowed down, never hesitated, never looked back at the fire. He focused only on one thing: getting Andrew away. Together, clumsily and painfully, they crossed the distance until the air finally cleared and the heat faded behind them. A couple of strangers ran over to help, lifting Andrew to safety while sirens echoed somewhere in the distance, but even then Caramelo refused to step away, pressing his body against Andrew's side, trembling as if he had just realized how close he had come to losing him. Later that night, back in the apartment with his ankle wrapped and the storm finally passing outside, Andrew sat on the couch while Caramelo slept curled tightly against his leg. Exhausted but peaceful. The room was quiet again, the same quiet he had known for years, yet it felt completely different now, completely. He replayed everything in his mind: the shelter, the 10 minutes, the decision he almost didn't make, the night Caramelo woke him when he was sick, and now this. And the truth settled in with absolute clarity. He had walked into that shelter believing he was rescuing a helpless dog, believing he was the one offering a second chance, but somehow, without him noticing, the roles had changed. Caramelo had become the one protecting him, staying beside him, refusing to let him fall apart or disappear. The dog no one wanted, the one labeled last chance, had chosen him and saved his life not once, but twice. Andrew gently rested his hand on Caramelo's head, feeling the slow rhythm of his breathing, and for the first time in years, the fear of being alone was completely gone. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He had someone who stayed, someone who fought for him, someone who made an empty apartment feel like home. And as he looked down at the small, caramel-colored dog sleeping beside him, Andrew realized that some heroes don't make noise, don't wear uniforms, and don't ask for recognition. Sometimes they simply lie next to you in the dark, breathing softly, making sure you're still there when the morning comes.